Federalist 21, Part 4. Just wanted to remind you again, the highlighted area is where the first 13 original colonies were. This is in 1775. And look how much land is available to them. This is very important in shaping of the American history. All this land will eventually become available to them, gradually but eventually. So keep that in mind. All right, I'll start reading. The wealth of nations depends upon an infinite variety of causes. Situation, soil, climate, the nature of the productions, the nature of the government, the genius of the citizens, the degree of information they have possess, the state of commerce, of arts, of industry. These circumstances and many more, too complex, minute, or adventitious to admit of a particular specification, occasion differences hardly conceivable in the relative opulence and riches of different countries. The consequence clearly is that there can be no common measure of national wealth, and of course no general or satisfactory rule by which the ability of a state to pay taxes can be determined. The attempt, therefore, to regulate the contributions of the members of a confederacy by any such rule cannot fail to be productive of glaring inequality and extreme oppression. So remember in Federalist 21, he says, three of the main difficulties and deficiencies and shortcomings of our confederation are, the first thing is we cannot enforce the national law. If Confederation makes a law, it cannot enforce it on people in different states. Number two, it says if there is a problem in one of the states, if a rebellion happens, the Confederation cannot stop it from spreading. Number three is the way we make requisitions to the states for them to pay us money so that we can run the national government. He says any way we've tried it, any way we have used the system of taxes or no taxes in this past 13 years, just depending on how you count. But he says in this past few years that we've lived under the Confederation has been not right, either unfair to one part of the country or the other, and we can never count on the amount of money that will be coming to the treasury of the country. So he says these are some of the things that we need to remedy, we need to correct. This inequality would of itself be sufficient in America to work the eventual destruction of the Union, if any mode of enforcing a compliance with its requisitions could be devised. The suffering states would not long consent to remain associated upon a principle which distributed the public burdens with so unequal a hand, and which was calculated to impoverish and oppress the citizens of some states, while those of others would scarcely be conscious of the small proportion of the weight they were required to sustain. This, however, is an evil inseparable from the principle of quotas and requisitions. He says if we keep the system of quotas and requisitions in place, we're going to be unfair to some states, and this in itself will create animosity and eventually war between these states. So we have to be serious about taking care of this problem. There is no method of steering clear of this inconvenience but by authorizing the national government to raise its own revenues in its own way. So the national government should be itself able to raise money the way it decides to, not to ask states every time it needs money to run the government. Imposts, excises, and in general, all duties upon articles of consumption may be compared to a fluid which will in time find its level with the means of paying them. So if we put taxes on imports, if we put taxes on certain things like liquor that is used inside the country, and some taxes, some other taxes that will be fairly applied to different parts of the country, that will itself help bring in a lot of revenues. So one way of looking at it, he says a tax on consumption. And like we talked, one example he gave, he said like when you tax the liquors like rum, consumption will go down and it will be better for the society to steer people the right way, plus make money for the revenue. So one of the things he's talking about here is that the amount to be contributed by each citizen will in a degree be at his own option and can be regulated by an attention to his resources. The rich may be extravagant, the poor can be frugal, and private oppression may always be avoided by a judicious selection of objects proper for such imposition. So we're going to be judicious, we're going to be smart about what things to tax or put a consumption tax on, what things not to. It says you can't put a consumption tax on everything, but we're going to be judicious to make the right choices on the things we will tax. If inequalities should arise in some states from duties on particular objects, these will in all probability be counterbalanced by proportional inequalities in other states from the duties on other objects. In the course of time and things, an equilibrium as far as it is attainable in so complicated a subject will be established everywhere. Or if inequalities should still exist, they would neither be so great in their degree, so uniform in their oppression, nor so odious in their appearance as those which would necessarily spring from quotas upon any scale that can possibly be devised. So he says, let's say we tax something and the tax burden will be heavier on, let's say, the northern states. He says there are other taxes that the burden will be heavier on the southern states than on the northern states. So he says there will be an equilibrium. They will even each other out. He says any way you look at it, it is better than the system we have right now with this quotas and with requisitions. Okay, we will continue reading the last part in part 5, video 5, next video.